Welcome back, everybody. It's two guys in a stack of comics. My name's Mike. Over there is Reed, and behind me is two stacks of comics. So you got two guys and two stacks of comics. How you doing, Reed?
I'm doing good, man. Gonna talk one of our favorite franchises and talk the future of it. So really cool.
Right, you
Um,
got the Dune issue two just came out, I think, last week, right?
yeah, no, we're pretty recently doing having a comic book, and then obviously the recent Dune 2 movie. It hit Blu-ray this week. It's been on digital for a bit, and then obviously there's a great collection of the books that have been available for years. But we just
And
want to talk
and
a little bit.
Dune Part Two drops on HBO Max, I think,
Yeah,
tonight.
HBO Max for free, I think tomorrow. Yeah. So we got a lot of good stuff in the Dune world. I think there was also a trailer this week for a prequel series they're doing, as well, kind of about the Bene Gesserit and the foundations of that. And so that not the greatest trailer I've ever seen, but who knows what that'll be. But what we wanted to talk about today is kind of the ideas for Dune 3 or Dune Messiah or whatever they'll end up doing. What we kind of know about it so far is Denis Villeneuve has said he does want to come back and direct, which I think is probably the biggest thing that gives this movie hope, and that he has done such a good job with the first two. And then it does seem like Zendaya and Timothy Chalamet, along with a couple of other actors, have agreed they would come back as well. I think the only story beats that have kind of been mentioned so far is that I'm trying to remember her name, the woman who plays Black Florence Pugh, who was in Black Widow. She plays Princess Irulan, the one who marries Paul. She's supposed to be in the next film, and then Anya Taylor-Joy, who plays Paul's younger sister, is supposed to be in Dune Messiah if that happens as well. So we do know there's some good actors, some good characters that are in there. I think the interesting part, though, is that Dune Messiah, if they adapt that book, is not going to be what most audiences who have not read the books
I
will
think
anticipate.
they're going to be in for a little bit of trouble because Doom Messiah takes place like I don't know how many
Like
years
12
later.
years later after the
Yeah,
original, yeah.
and where the movie left off was right in the middle of the war and the conflict, which I don't know. Like, what are they gonna do? Are they gonna create? Are you gonna try and touch Frank Herbert and kind of rewrite? I
You're right a
mean,
little bit. They
and
did do some
that's
rewriting at the end, and that Shawnee doesn't stay with him.
yeah,
And so I think what's interesting is, yeah, you kind of get the divide, like you said, Mike, in terms of are we rewriting Frank Herbert? And that really what they would be doing is if it picks up with what the audience who watch the movies would expect. And I think there's a huge divide between the people who have read the books and the people who have watched the films. And I think that's the biggest thing Warner Brothers and all these folks are going to have to kind of balance is people who watch that thing, your expectation for the next movie is gonna be like, this is the war. Like the next
yeah,
movie is going to be the war.
right.
And if there's a 12-year jump, it would kind of be like if in, Star Wars after Return of the Jedi, you're like, okay, now they got to go rescue Han. And it's just next movie, 12 years later, Han's been rescued. The Empire was defeated in the time jump. I think
Right.
that will be really interesting to see what they do. And so, Michael, kind of go with you. 'Cause the other thing with Dune Messiah, too, there's not a lot of action in that book. One of the things that Denis Villeneuve has done a great job is even in Dune 1, where there isn't as much action scenes, there was that attack scene on the Atreides from the Harkonnens that was so well done. You kind of the last stand of Duncan, Idaho, with Momoa doing that action scene, and there was a lot of great things. Even the fight at the end with Paul, where he kind of earns his place among the Fremen. Dune Messiah does not have a lot of action, and so it will be really interesting to see what they balance book wise. Mike, what do you think they should do as far as would you rather see kind of a book adaptation, or do you think maybe they should pave their own trail? And what do you think on this?
It's dangerous territory if you pave your own trail because for up until now you have all the dune heads pretty much on board and loving this adaptation, right? And so if you go and pave your own trail, you're going to pull the rug out from under the dune heads who know
On
this
your
stuff backwards
fervent
and
fan
forwards.
base?
And so I don't know, you could kind of do like maybe a montage of what
Maybe
happened in
fill in with some
between.
flashbacks to the
Yeah,
war.
flashback, something like that. I don't know.
I think the hard part they're in is narratively what they did at the end of Dune 2. And I'll be honest, as much as I'm always a adhere to the source material guy, I will always say that I want books and movies to adhere to the source material. I do always understand as well. there has to be a little room for interpretation for films to kind of throw some things in that make the audience like it. Now, I kind
Yeah,
of look at it like one of my favorite novels of all time is Casino Royale, the Ian Fleming book. They did a beautiful adaptation of that with Daniel Craig a few years ago, like what, 15 years ago when they did that Bond film.
yeah,
And while it's very loyal to the source material in some ways, they fluffed it up with some extra action sequences. They did a beginning kind of parkour chase scene that's not at all in the novel. There's more action. The final shootout's a lot more than it was in the book. And I understood that as like a movie. As much as I love Casino Royale, the power of the narrative of a book being in your mind makes it more interesting than when you put it on film. I think with Dune, the problem they're going to have is very similar to that in that I think the Dune heads, as you call them, like that's going to tick them off quite a bit if you change some of that stuff because it's a bit. Bond has a lot of fan base, but there's more movie Bond fans than there are Dune book fans. And I don't
right.
know if Dune the movie has taken off so much that you can go so narratively different than the actual source material is and still keep the fans.
It's going to be tough to be sure. It's going to be kind of tough. There's a lot of palace intrigue uh, and and politics in Messiah, and I think it's going to be kind of. I'll have to reread it. It's been many years, but it's going to be interesting to see how far they're going to have to get away to produce a movie that will, I mean, I don't know how well did two do as opposed to one.
Two did better than one. One was a little
Really?
bit at the tail end of when folks weren't going to the movies as much. I don't blame, the pandemic so much for all the movie performance, but it did well. Two superseded that and did better. I think the big thing as well, a lot of the characters in the movies that people like, because of the time skip in the books, characters like Lady Jessica are kind of still in the movie. In the book, Lady Jessica's gone. She does not appear in Dune Messiah. So
Right,
again, you'd have to kind of write some of the characters that are in the film out of the book or out of the movie. I think the other thing, and this is where the ending of Dune 2, I think, kind of puts them in a precarious situation. Narratively, they very much had. Shawnee was not on board with Paul at the end of the movie. In the
right,
novel, she stays. In the book, completely goes her own way. If anything, she kind of seems like she'd be the person coming after Paul in the
right.
next film. In the book, Messiah, she's with him, and a lot is like threats to her and threats to their kids, and
Yeah.
that's not really a play at all. And so it'll just be really interesting to see what they do. I guess what we'll kind of do here is just Mike, if you got into a room with Denny Villeneuve and then he went, "Hey, what do you think I should do here? Should I pave my own trail? Should I stick to the book? What would the advice be that you would give them if you were put in that position?"
I would say, I would say stick to the book. Throw in some filler if you have to in the form of like a montage or something to get the moviegoers up to speed and understand where we are and kind of fill in that 10-year gap. And then I would go into the story. It's really interesting. And I think for folks who stood with it from one to two, even if they were not readers of the books, they were just the moviegoers, I think they'd be okay with that. You've established this world and you're going to want to find out what happens. You're going to be invested into the politics and, the palace intrigue and everything that's going on in Dune Messiah. I think you could do it. If anybody could pull it off, it's that talented crew because they did it. They did amazing.
Yeah, I think the huge biggest strength they have is if they keep the same creative team that have done the first two. Um, to be honest, those are just absolute kind of masterpieces of filmmaking in terms of just visually. The
Absolutely.
films are just engrossing. And so Messiah does take place on more places than just like Arrakis. And so I think that also could be interesting with how would Denis Villeneuve bring those things to life. I would agree with you. I think maybe you kind of split the narrative a bit. Maybe the first half is kind of just show some of the clips. I mean, because we do know in the book the war happened. So I think you could inundate the first half of the movie with action sequences. Maybe somewhere within that first half, it'd be changing it, but maybe you have Shawnee kind of attacks Paul and it kind of just ends up resolving itself where they get together and you kind of put them back into a place. where they have their kids and then you can get back onto the narrative. I think you could do that, especially because these Dune movies aren't short. Like these are 2.5, almost 3 hour films with both of them. And because they're so visually interesting, I don't think the audience risks getting bored. So I think maybe split it into two in terms of, I think it would honestly be better to do two films and one maybe just be kind of the war part thing. But I think if you just did Dune Messiah as one movie, maybe the first hour and 15 minutes is kind of flashbacks to the war, Paul winning the war, kind of that holy war that's happening, maybe reunite him with Shawnee, and then deal with the palace intrigue at the end. And then I think you can do some touches like they've done with the Bond stuff, where like in the book, there's a lot of political stuff that happens. You could just have where, hey, here's a scene where an actual assassin breaks through and tries to kill him, and you get a little hand-to-hand combat. And I don't think that would be too much of a departure where you could go, hey, in spirit, it's close enough. I really think the hard part they're going to have is I don't know what you do with the actors who will not be in the film. And that, like Rebecca Ferguson, who's played Lady Jessica. I don't believe Gurney is in Messiah either. So like, you have a lot of really good actors that the audience likes who don't appear. I think it just will be really interesting to see. But I just think it's so cool that we're even having the conversation about what it could be. I think as fans of Dune, I know you were an older school fan. You kind of got me to read the book about a decade ago, and I read it in high school, and then I reread it, and I read it before the movies came out. I think it's just really cool that this source material is generating interest, that people are talking about this, that people are excited, especially because Dune never really got its credit because so much of it was lifted for Star Wars. I love Star Wars. Obviously, I got,
Yeah,
Mandalorian behind me. But when you
yeah.
really look at the building blocks of it, while there are some very clear differences, a lot of Star Wars is lifted for Dune. And so it's really cool that while Star Wars has kind of fallen a bit because of Disney, Dune has kind of taken its place. And it might be very interesting if, 15 years from now, this generation of kids is more talking about Dune the way that people 15 years ago talked about
Nine
Star Wars.
movies, right? Nine, 10
Yeah.
movies of Dune. I mean, and you could do it because there's so much material. And like you suggested, like maybe they break Messiah up into two movies. Hey, if we're
Yeah, I
going
think that's
long, if we're playing the long game like Star Wars, you could do that, and that would
yeah.
be perfectly fine. Because how many pages is Messiah?
Messiah is about half the length of Dune. So I want to say that the regular Dune here, I think that one's like almost 800 in the format I have. And I
Yeah,
think Messiah's 380. So I mean, you're dealing with half of it. But I think the thing is, I think you've got to bridge the gap for the audience. I think that's the
yeah.
biggest thing is I do think if you just go 12 years
12
later, hey,
years.
the Shawnee thing has resolved itself. The war is over. Jessica and all the others are gone. Well, I think there will be some folks who could get on board with that. I do think a lot of your audience, who's the film audience, are going to be like, "What the heck, man? What did I miss?" Like,
it,
you'll have that feeling of like you missed a
it
movie.
was
Like,
like
was
the
there a
Thanos
part?
snap, right?
Yeah, and I think I do think you need action in it, and that while I don't think it should become like just mindless, stupid action. I think because you have Villeneuve, he'll integrate things in such a way that I think you could make it work. And I think the biggest thing that has helped Dune so much is that they did break part one and part two. I think making Dune one movie would have been a disaster. You would have
Yeah,
had to rush so many things, and it had such an impact in two because of the buildup.
yeah,
So I think it'd be interesting to do Messiah in two parts. There is definitely source material to mine, though. I do think it
yeah.
will be interesting. Will we ever see the human sandworm hybrid that appears in later books? I don't know visually if that will ever happen,
we'll
but
give
it will
special
be
effects a
interesting.
little time to catch up to that one.
Yeah, because Dune goes to some really interesting and weird places down the line in the book series.
Yeah,
But I think for Messiah, I think they could really just fluff a little action. Maybe Casino Royale. I think that's the template. I
yeah,
think Casino Royale, the movie, it honors the spirit of the book. A lot of it is very accurate. There's direct lines of dialogue that are lifted. A lot of the plot is there. The villain's the same, all that. But hey, let's throw a car chase in. Hey, let's throw a parkour action scene. I think you could do that with Messiah. Throw some battles in. Let us know what you guys
absolutely.
think below. As always, we appreciate you watching. If you're normally we'd cover comic books on here, we kind of feel like Dune veers enough into the comic kind
Yeah,
of area and does have some books coming out. And if you have not read the books, if you are a movie fan, cannot recommend check these things out. Frank Herbert, absolute master craftsman, storyteller. So many good twists and turns narratively. Definitely would recommend it. These, I think I got this set pretty cheap on like Amazon. Not that we're peddling for Amazon, but you can absolutely find them, or find your local used, better yet, find your local used bookstore. And if you can find your local
Yep.
used bookstore and find that, absolutely. But definitely check out the books if you haven't. They are well worth the time, especially because you got about 2 or 3 years here before we'll get a next one. So pass the time by reading the
Plenty of
original book.
time to catch up on the reading.
As always, we appreciate you watching, and we will catch you in our next video.
Thanks, everybody.